Imagine the most rational, just coldly logical person you know.
Okay, I'm picturing them.
Right. So the kind of mind that doesn't just use critical thinking, but literally writes the ancient textbook on how human beings are, supposed to construct an argument.
Like the actual architect of epistemology.
Exactly. Someone who weighs every claim, tests every single fact. But then imagine that exact same person walking into their home, discovering a massive betrayal involving their spouse and, well, the literal king of the gods.
That is a wild scenario.
It is. And in response, this bastion of cold, hard logic just instantly drops this apocalyptic, reality-altering curse that turns their wife to stone and physically mutates the god.
Yeah, it's just the ultimate paradox, really.
Right. It's arguably one of the most fascinating psychological and philosophical contradictions in all of ancient literature. And that tension is exactly what we are unpacking today.
Which is going to be incredibly fun.
So welcome to the deep dive. We are looking at a huge stack of incredibly diverse sources today. We've got encyclopedic historical entries tracking ancient timelines. We have these deeply detailed spiritual video analyses breaking down the symbolism.
And we even have insights straight from the website of a living sacred pilgrimage site in Bihar, India. The Gautama Maharishi Tirtha.
Yeah, it's just a remarkable cross-section of human thought.
It really is. I mean, we are dealing with texts that span an incomprehensible amount of time.
Right.
We're pulling from the Rig Veda, which sits among the oldest known religious texts in human history, all the way down to these localized contemporary traditions that people, still physically participate in today.
And the mission here for you, the listener, is not to just rattle off a dry list of ancient historical dates or give you a Wikipedia summary of a myth.
No, definitely not.
The goal is to uncover how this one single figure, Gautama Maharishi, connects the very origins of logical reasoning to some truly dramatic cosmic scandals.
And ultimately to these deep, profound insights into karma, justice, and redemption.
Because in our modern era, we are constantly bombarded by information overload, right? We're struggling to figure out what is true, what is fake.
And what the actual consequences of our actions are. The stories of ancient sages like Gautama offer a blueprint for that. They teach us how ancient minds attempted to process truth.
Yeah, and throughout this discussion, we'll be looking at these texts objectively, decoding the philosophical narratives and the symbolic meanings woven into the myths.
Exactly. We want to explore not just the events, but why they were codified in this specific way.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the core identity. Who exactly was Gautama Maharishi?
Well, the sources revere him as an ancient Hindu sage. But he isn't just any sage. He is specifically designated as one of the Saptarishis.
The 7 great sages.
Yes. And, to understand the gravity of that title, you really have to understand how ancient Indian cosmology views time.
Right, because it's not linear.
Exactly. It doesn't view time linearly the way we typically do today, with a distinct beginning and an eventual end. It operates these massive cyclical epochs.
Like seasons, but on a cosmic, unimaginably huge scale.
That's a great way to put it. These massive cycles are called kalpas, and within them are manvantaras. And the sources specifically place Gautama in the 7th manvantara, which is known as the Vaivasvata manvantara.
Okay, so where do the Saptarishis fit into that?
Well, in this cosmological framework, the Saptarishis are not merely historical men who, lived, taught a few students, and passed away. They are considered cosmic guides.
Wow.
They are the intellectual, spiritual, and moral pillars of an entire epoch.
So to be named one of the Saptarishis means you are basically part of the foundational operating system for human consciousness during that era.
That is a brilliant analogy. If humanity's understanding of the universe is the software, the Saptarishis wrote the base code.
It's incredible.
Right. To be included in this specific group of 7 means that Gautama's influence on ancient human thought was absolutely foundational. He provided the architectural framework for how people understood their reality.
And his lineage really reflects that massive status. I mean, he is the son of the Brahmin sage Durgatamas.
Yes.
And our sources note that Durgatamas is also referred to with the patronymic Rahugana in the Rig Veda. Gautama belongs to the Nyayas lineage.
Which is legendary.
Yeah, for anyone keeping track of ancient intellectual bloodlines, the Nyayas lineage is massive. It's the exact same ancestral tree that produces another huge figure, the sage Bharadwaj.
It's essentially an intellectual dynasty.
But what really stopped me in my tracks while reviewing these sources is just how ubiquitous Gautama's name is. The sheer geographic and temporal spread of his citations is just wild.
It's everywhere.
He is explicitly mentioned in the Rig Veda, the Yajurveda, and the Atharva Veda. He pops up in the Shatapatha Brahmana. He's a central figure in parts of the Ramayana epic.
And his lineage is all over the Mahabharata epic.
Right, and he even crosses religious boundaries, appearing in the foundational texts of both Buddhism and Jainism.
The crossover appeal is perhaps the most telling aspect of his historical footprint, honestly. In ancient India, you had orthodox traditions, which were rooted in the authority of the Vedas.
Right.
These are divided into Shruti, which means that which is heard or revealed literature, and Smriti, which means that which is remembered, like the great epics.
And Gautama is a heavyweight in all of them.
Exactly. But heterodox traditions like Buddhism and Jainism actively and sometimes aggressively challenged that orthodox Vedic authority.
Yeah, they rejected the caste system and the rigid ritualism of the Vedas. They were essentially the philosophical disruptors of their time.
Completely. Yet, even these disruptive countercultural movements still reference Gautama. They still engage with his frameworks. That proves his universal respect as a thinker.
He wasn't just a religious figurehead cheering for his specific sect.
No, he was a philosophical titan whose core ideas regarding logic and reality transcended sectarian lines. You basically couldn't build a new philosophical school without at least addressing the groundwork Gautama had laid down.
Wait, hold on. This is where my brain starts to glitch a little bit because the timeline just doesn't make logical sense.
How so?
Well, if he is popping up in the Rig Veda, which is incredibly ancient, and he is also actively involved in the events of the Ramayana, and his descendants are fighting in the Mahabharata.
Ah, I see what you mean.
Yeah, we are talking about texts and eras that span thousands of years. How is that physically possible? Are we supposed to believe he's an immortal being? Or is Gautama just a convenient title that later writers slapped onto their own work to give it authority?
That is the exact right question to ask. And it gets to the heart of how ancient traditions viewed identity and authorship, which is very different from our modern obsession with, copyright and historical literalism.
Right, they didn't have ISBN numbers back then.
Exactly. Ancient Indian texts frequently compress massive timelines. But more importantly, there was a deeply ingrained practice regarding the concept of gotra.
Okay, break that down for me. How does a gotra work in this context?
So, a gotra is a lineage tracing back to a common male ancestor, usually a great sage. In these ancient traditions, a founding sage's name was often used to represent his entire school of thought, his biological descendants, or his intellectual disciples.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the individual ego was secondary to the continuous stream of knowledge.
Oh.
So when a later text like the Mahabharata says Gautama said this or Gautama did that, it doesn't necessarily mean the original biological man from the Vedic era literally walked into the room.
It's someone else.
It often means a prominent descendant or an intellectual heir acting entirely within the established tradition or authority of Gautama's Gotra took that action.
That makes total sense. It's like looking at a modern corporate or intellectual legacy.
Yeah.
If we say Ford revolutionized the automotive industry in the 1920s, we mean Henry Ford.
Right.
But if we say Ford released a revolutionary electric vehicle this year, we don't mean a zombie Henry Ford built a car.
Exactly.
We mean the lineage, the company operating under his foundational vision did it. The name represents the continuous entity.
That is a perfect modern equivalent. The name carries the weight of the institution. And understanding that institutional weight is crucial because our sources dedicate a massive amount of detail to Gautama's family tree.
Yeah, his lineage essentially seeded multiple different eras of these epics with profound thinkers and warriors. Let's trace some of these branches because they reach into really fascinating corners of the mythology.
We should.
And it proves we aren't just looking at a dry list of begats, The most famous relationship, which forms the emotional core of our entire discussion today, is his marriage to Ahalya.
Yes, Ahalya.
According to the Ramayana, their eldest son together is Shatananda.
And Shatananda is not a minor background character at all. He goes on to become the head priest, the Kulaguru, of King Janaka's court in the kingdom of Mithila.
Which is huge because King Janaka is the father of Sita, the heroine of the Ramayana.
Precisely. So right out of the gate, Gautama's direct offspring is positioned at the absolute epicenter of spiritual and political power in one of India's two great epics. The logic and spiritual authority of Gautama is directly advising the throne of Mithila.
But then the sources pull us into the other great epic, the Mahabharata, and the family tree just explodes with variation.
It is very dense.
The section known as the Adi Parva mentions that the Gautama lineage produced two sons named Sharadvana and Sirakari. Now, Sharadvana was also known by the name Gautama, further illustrating that naming convention we just talked about.
Right.
And Sharadvana's children were Kripa and Kripi, who were also known as Gautama and Gautami.
And for anyone familiar with the Mahabharata, the name Kripa triggers immediate recognition. That is Kripacharya.
Yes, Kripacharya is one of the most vital figures in the entire epic. He is a master of martial arts, a royal guru to both the Pandavas and the Kauravas, and one of the very few central figures who actually survives the catastrophic Kurukshetra war.
Think about the thematic continuity there, too.
What do you mean?
Well, Gautama is the grand architect of logic, rules, and epistemology. Thousands of years later, his descendant, Kripacharya, is the master of military strategy, martial rules, and the cold, hard logic of warfare.
Oh, wow.
The intellectual rigor mutated from philosophical debate into martial survival, but the underlying requirement for discipline, structure, and absolute adherence to rules remains the defining family trait.
That is an incredible connection, the logic of the mind becoming the logic of the sword.
Yeah,
And the branches just keep going.
they do.
The epic mentions a daughter who goes unnamed in the Adi Parva. But then, in the Sabaparva section of the Mahabharata, a Gautama is described as wedding a woman named Arshinara.
Right, the daughter of Bushinara.
Yeah, and this wedding takes place in Magadha, which is the kingdom ruled by the incredibly powerful and infamous King Jarasandha. Through Ashinara, the lineage produces many children, the eldest being Kakshivada.
Which anchors Gautama's intellectual DNA deeply into the political geography of the Mahabharata era. They aren't just isolated ascetics meditating in caves.
No, not at all.
This lineage is constantly interacting with major kingdoms, royal courts, and the shifting power dynamics of the ancient world.
And we can't forget the Puranic texts. The sources cite the Vamana Purana, which explicitly names three daughters, Jaya, Jayanti, and Aparhita. Other regional sources bring in daughters named Vijaya and Anjani is a massive name drop.
Immense. Because Anjani is the mother of Lord Hanuman.
Exactly. So the lineage connects directly to Hanuman, the ultimate symbol of strength, intellect, and absolute unwavering devotion in the Ramayana.
It's like Gautama's biological and spiritual DNA is woven into every major virtue celebrated in these epics.
And finally, we have the profound Upanishadic connections. He is cited as the ancestor of Shvetakatu. Shvetakatu is the son of the sage Udalaka Aruni, and they are central figures in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad.
Engaging in some of the most complex, abstract philosophical dialogues regarding the nature of the self and the universe.
It is literally impossible to turn a page in ancient Indian literature without bumping into someone from Gautama's extended family tree.
Which perfectly illustrates why he is considered a Saptarishi. He isn't just a character, he is a genesis point. His descendants populate the courts of kings, the battlefields of great wars, and the most esoteric philosophical debates of the Upanishads.
Okay, so we have firmly established his scale and his ubiquity, but what did he actually do to earn this foundational Mount Rushmore-level status in the first place?
That's the big question.
To answer that, we have to look at his role as the architect of logic.
Yes, Gautama is universally recognized across these traditions as the originator of Nyaya Shastra.
The school of logic. Now, the sources mention he is known by a couple of very specific, almost poetic names in this context.
Right, like Akshapada.
Yeah, which is sometimes translated as having eyes on his feet or Akshacharana. He is also known as Medhatithi. And he didn't just passively teach these concepts to a few students under a tree, he codified them.
He composed the heavy foundational texts of this school. We're talking about the Nyaya Sutras, the Vedic Vritti, the Nyaya Dharma Sutra, and the Nyaya Darshanam.
We really need to pause here and unpack what Nyaya actually is. Because if you don't understand Nyaya, you cannot understand the motivations of Gautama in the stories we are about to discuss.
Absolutely. Nyaya is one of the 6 orthodox schools, or darshanas, of Hindu philosophy.
But it's not philosophy in the way we might casually use the word today, right? Like friends sitting around a coffee shop pondering the meaning of life or talking about their feelings.
Not at all. Nyaya is a rigorous, demanding, almost mathematical system of thought. The word Nyaya itself implies justice, rule, or method.
Okay.
It focuses intensely on logic, on the absolute rules of formal debate, and most crucially, on epistemology.
Epistemology. For anyone who hasn't taken a Philosophy 101 class recently, that is basically the study of knowledge itself. How do we know what we know, and how can we prove it?
Exactly. It is the science of proof. Gautama realized that before you can sit down and debate the nature of the immortal soul, or the existence of God, or the creation of the universe, you first have to agree on the ground rules.
Because otherwise you're just arguing in circles.
Right. If we don't agree on what constitutes valid evidence, our debate is just noise. So, Gautama essentially wrote the definitive ancient rulebook for critical thinking.
How does that actually work in practice? Like, what are the rules he laid out?
Well, the core of the Nyaya Sutras outlines 4 valid sources of knowledge, which are known as pramanas. The first is pratyaksha, which means direct perception.
So seeing is believing. If I look at a fire and I feel the heat, my direct sensory perception is valid evidence that the fire exists.
Correct. But, perception has limits. You can't see everything. So the second, and perhaps the most analyzed valid source of knowledge in Nyaya is anumana, which translates to inference.
This is where it gets like a detective story.
Yes, the classic textbook example used in ancient Indian philosophy to explain anumana is the smoke on the hill.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine you are standing in a valley and you look up at a distant hill. You cannot see any flames. Your direct perception, pratyaksha, cannot confirm fire. However, you clearly see a thick plume of smoke rising from the hill.
Okay, I see the smoke.
And through your past experiences, you possess a universal, invariable rule. Wherever there is smoke, there is fire. You have seen this in your kitchen. You have seen this at a campfire.
Right.
So you apply that universal rule to the specific instance of the hill. You infer, with logical certainty, that there must be fire on the hill, even though you cannot see it.
And Gautama actually mapped this out.
Yes, Gautama codified the exact multi-step logical syllogism required to make that inference valid and bulletproof against counterarguments.
That is incredibly structured. It's like writing the code for a computer program to process logic. What are the other two?
The third is upamana, which is comparison or analogy. If you have never seen a wild ox, but I tell you, it looks very much like a domestic cow, but with specific different features, and then you go to the forest and see a creature matching that description.
You use comparison to validate the knowledge that this is a wild ox.
Exactly. And the fourth is shabda, which is the reliable testimony of an undisputed expert.
So, if a highly respected, truthful person comes down from the hill and says, I was just up there, there is a fire, their verbal testimony is considered a valid source of knowledge, provided their character is flawless.
Precisely. Gautama systematically broke down human thought into these testable categories. He created the framework to identify fallacies, to expose bad arguments, and to arrive at objective truth. He literally codified rationality.
And this is exactly where I hit a wall. This is the contradiction that makes Gautama so fascinating. We have just established that he is the ultimate master of cold, hard logic.
Right.
He demands proof. He demands step-by-step inference. He writes the literal textbook on rational debate and emotional detachment in the pursuit of truth. But as our sources detail, and as we are going to explore deeply in a moment, this is the exact same man who flies into a massive apocalyptic rage when he feels he has been wronged.
It seems completely contradictory.
It really does. He discovers a betrayal, and he doesn't initiate a calm, multi-step logical syllogism. He drops nuclear-level curses that destroy his family and mutate a god. How in the world do we reconcile the rational father of epistemology with a man who reacts with such catastrophic mythological fury?
It is a stunning juxtaposition, I agree. And to reconcile it, we have to fundamentally recalibrate our modern definitions of justice and logic.
How so?
When we think of a logician today, we picture an academic in a tweed jacket, completely detached from emotion, calmly writing equations on a chalkboard. But in the ancient Indian philosophical framework, Nyaya, which remember translates to justice, is not just an academic exercise.
Right.
It is intrinsically tied to the inescapable physical laws of cause and effect.
They're talking about karma.
Yes. The doctrine of karma. We often misuse the word karma today to mean a sort of cosmic revenge system, like, he cut me off in traffic, so karma will give him a flat tire. But in these ancient systems, karma is viewed as an absolute mathematical law of physics. Every single action generates an equal and opposite reaction to maintain the equilibrium of the universe.
So it's not a judge sitting in the clouds handing out sentences. It's gravity. If you drop an apple, it falls. If you violate the moral order, there is a consequence.
Exactly. Dharma is the righteous moral order of the universe. When dharma is violently disrupted, for instance, by God deceiving a mortal woman and violating a sacred space, the logic of the universe demands a reaction to restore the balance.
The cosmic equation is suddenly unbalanced.
And Gautama is the mathematician trying to balance the equation.
Wow. So when Gautama issues these terrifying curses, it's a mistake to view it merely as a jealous husband losing his temper.
Completely.
Through the lens of Nyaya, his actions, even his seemingly wrathful, destructive curses, are the purest, most severe execution of absolute justice. The crime was immense, so the karmic reaction must be equally immense.
Gautama doesn't just theorize about justice in a vacuum. He embodies the relentless, unyielding, sometimes terrifying force of it. He is logic manifesting as a force of nature.
That completely changes the context for me. He isn't acting out of blind emotion, he is acting as the instrument of universal equilibrium, even if restoring that equilibrium requires a brutally heavy hand. He has diagnosed the break in reality, and the curse is the necessary painful surgery to fix it.
Precisely. This philosophical framework, this absolute uncompromising commitment to truth and consequence, regardless of who it hurts or how severe it seems, sets the stage for everything he does in his life.
Which brings up a very practical question. If Gautama was the master of this uncompromising logic, how did he apply it to the complex, messy society he actually lived in?
That's a great point.
Because philosophy is wonderful on paper, but it means absolutely nothing if it doesn't survive contact with real human beings. And our sources provide this absolutely brilliant, radical example of his justice in action, straight from the Chandogya Upanishad.
This narrative is one of the most profound socio-philosophical statements in all of Upanishadic literature. It is the story of Satyakama Jabala.
The sources also note he is referred to as Jabali in the Ramayana. So let's paint the picture of this society. We have this young boy, Satyakama. He deeply desires to receive an education.
Specifically, he wants Vedic initiation. He wants to study the nature of reality.
And he decides to approach the great, intimidating Gautama Maharishi for this education.
We have to establish the stakes here, though.
Oh.
In the Vedic period, education, specifically the transmission of sacred, philosophical, and ritualistic knowledge, was not a public utility. It was not a right.
Right.
It was a highly restricted, heavily guarded privilege. It was tightly controlled by lineage, family background, and the rigid structures of the caste system.
If you weren't born into the right family, the doors of the academy were permanently locked.
Exactly. To be accepted as a student, a guru would typically demand to know your gotra, your family lineage. This was the ancient background check to ensure you were pure enough and socially qualified enough to handle the power of the sacred texts.
But Satyakama has a massive, seemingly insurmountable societal problem. He doesn't know his lineage. He is the son of a woman named Jabala, and the sources are brutally clear about Jabala's societal status.
She worked as a prostitute or a wandering maidservant who was intimately involved with many different men in her youth.
Because of this reality, she literally cannot tell Satyakama who his biological father is.
He carries the ultimate social stigma of that era. He is fatherless, born to a marginalized woman. In a society entirely obsessed with pure bloodlines and aristocratic lineages, he is at the absolute bottom of the hierarchy.
He is an outcast. And yet this outcast decides to walk right up to Gautama, the strictest, most demanding logician in the world. And Gautama goes through the standard protocol. He asks the boy the gatekeeping question, "What is your lineage, my child? Who is your father?"
Now, consider the immense pressure on the boy in this moment. He is standing before a legend. The temptation to lie, to invent a respectable lineage, or to obscure the truth with vague answers would be overwhelming for almost anyone.
But Satyakama doesn't flinch. Instead of lying, he looks at Gautama and delivers the unvarnished, brutal truth. He says, "I asked my mother, and she told me she served many men in her youth and does not know who my father is. I am just Satyakama, the son of Jabala."
What is truly revolutionary is not just the boy's honesty, but Gautama's reaction to it. In that society, 99% of teachers would have turned the boy away instantly.
Oh, without a doubt.
The societal conditioning, the fear of pollution, the rigid rules of caste would override everything else. They would dismiss him as unworthy.
But Gautama isn't operating on societal bias. He is operating on Nyaya.
Precisely. Remember his core operating system. Truth and logic supersedes all illusions. Gautama evaluates the empirical evidence standing right in front of him.
And the evidence is a boy who possesses such a profound, fearless commitment to the truth that he is willing to publicly humiliate himself rather than tell a lie to get what he wants.
Gautama listens to this confession, looks at the boy, and makes a legendary deduction. He basically says, only a true seeker of truth, a true Brahmin in spirit, would have the courage to speak such a difficult truth without hesitation.
He judges the boy entirely on his character, bypassing his biological birthright completely.
Yes. Gautama accepts him, initiates him into the sacred knowledge, And Satyakana goes on to become a massive sage in his own right.
It is a breathtaking application of his philosophy. By accepting the son of a socially marginalized woman, Gautama proves that his commitment to justice is not merely theoretical or abstract.
He strips away the heavy, suffocating illusion of societal prejudice to find the logical, undeniable truth of the boy's character underneath. He proves that the capacity for truth is not genetic. It is a choice.
Imagine trying to explain the gravity of that today. Think about how incredibly hard it is right now, in the modern world, to break through glass ceilings. We still judge people based on what university they attended, what zip code they grew up in, or who their parents are networking with.
Exactly.
Gautama was actively, consciously shattering those ceilings thousands of years ago. It shows that true logic is inherently and radically inclusive. He wasn't guarding the gates of knowledge to keep people out. He was establishing a meritocracy of character. If you possess the truth, the gates open for you.
It is a powerful reminder that true logic does not conform to social biases. It actively dismantles them. And what makes Gautama even more compelling is that his insistence on truth didn't just apply to how he judged his students.
He applied it to himself, too.
He applied it ruthlessly to himself. He constantly sought out environments where his own intellect, his own assumptions, could be stress-tested.
Which perfectly transitions us into the next critical phase of his life we need to examine: Gautama's presence in the Upanishads. Because he didn't just sit comfortably in an isolated ashram holding court over subservient students.
No, he actively threw himself into the highest, most intimidating intellectual circles of the ancient world.
Indeed. The Upanishads represent the philosophical culmination of the Vedas. If the earlier Vedas are about rituals and invocations, the Upanishads are the ancient world's deepest existential inquiries.
They deal with the fundamental nature of reality, the concept of Brahman, the ultimate reality, and the Atman, the individual soul.
And in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, we find Gautama right in the thick of the action, specifically at the legendary court of King Janaka.
Yes.
I always picture King Janaka's court as the ancient equivalent of a supreme, high-stakes academic defense crossed with the philosophical gladiatorial arena. You had the absolute sharpest minds, the greatest scholars and sages traveling from all over the subcontinent to duel with words and logic.
It was the premier intellectual arena of the ancient world. If you believed you had uncovered a truth about the universe, you went to Janaka's court to prove it against the best.
And in this specific instance, documented in the texts, Gautama is present alongside other legendary heavyweights of ancient thought. The sources mention sages like Uddalaka Aruni and, importantly, Gargi Vachaknavi.
And Gargi is a brilliant female sage, which is an incredibly important detail.
Yeah, it shows that these high-level philosophical debates weren't just an exclusive boys' club. If you had the intellect, you were at the table.
Exactly. These figures traveled from the Kuru and Panchala regions, and they are all assembled at Janaka's court for one primary reason: to rigorously test another great sage, Yajnavalkya.
They want to determine if his knowledge of the absolute reality is truly as profound as his reputation claims.
They're acting as a peer review board, ancient style. They are throwing the most complex, paradoxical, brain-melting questions at him about the fabric of the cosmos.
They are probing for logical inconsistencies. But what is truly crucial for our understanding of Gautama's character is another specific tale from the Upanishads. It involves Gautama and a king named Pravahana Jaivali.
This story is fascinating, so set the stage for us.
Okay, so King Jaivali had previously met Gautama's descendant, a young man named Shvatakatu. Jaivali engages the young man and asks him some incredibly difficult, esoteric questions about the afterlife, the trajectory of the soul, and the mechanics of the cosmos.
Right.
And Shvatakatu, despite his prestigious lineage, is completely stumped. He has absolutely no idea how to answer. He is humiliated, and he runs back to Gautama, his elder and ancestor, and complains that the king asked him impossible questions.
Now consider how a lesser man, a man driven by ego and reputation, would react. He might dismiss the king's questions as irrelevant. He might get defensive about his lineage's prestige.
But what does Gautama do?
The absolute master of logic, the revered Brahman sage, realizes there's a gap in his own knowledge, so he goes directly to King Jaivali.
And he doesn't go there to argue or to defend his family's honor in a debate. He goes to learn.
Jaivali is impressed by this humility and promises Gautama a boon. The knowledge Jaivali then imparts is profound. He describes the intricate depth and beauty of the physical world, the cyclical journey of the soul after death.
And crucially, he teaches Gautama the inner mechanics of how to perform specific yajnas, or sacred rituals and sacrifices, not just as physical acts, but as cosmic alignments.
I really want to emphasize the power dynamics here.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Gautama is the guy who literally wrote the rule book on epistemology. He is a highly revered Brahmin, the highest caste in the spiritual hierarchy. Javali is a king, a Kshatriya.
Right.
In the rigid social structure of ancient India, the Brahmin is supposed to be the one imparting spiritual knowledge to the Kshatriya. The teacher does not bow to the politician.
But Gautama is so relentlessly committed to the truth that the moment he realizes his own database is lacking, he instantly drops his ego, ignores the social hierarchy, and willingly becomes a beginner again.
It is the ultimate lesson in intellectual humility. True, enduring intellect isn't about fiercely maintaining the facade that you know everything. It is about the relentless, fearless pursuit of what you don't know.
It is the willingness to admit ignorance, regardless of your status, your age, or the social standing of the person holding the answers.
Gautama embodies the very essence of the scientific method here. You form a hypothesis, you test it against reality, and if your data is lacking, you seek new evidence, even if it hurts your pride.
It is so refreshing to see that level of self-awareness in a foundational historical figure. But, well, we have reached the turning point. We can't talk about Gautama's life without diving into the deep end.
No, we can't.
We have seen his pristine intellect. We have seen his radical sense of social justice with Satyakama and his profound humility with King Javali. But now we have to transition to the most famous, the most emotionally devastating, and the most philosophically complex story associated with his entire existence.
Yes. We must confront the epic tragedy of his marriage to Ahalya, the deception of Indra, and the resulting curses.
We have to unpack this carefully, step by step, because the sources we are relying on, the Ramayana, the Ganesha Purana, the Upasana Kanda, they layer this narrative with so much psychological and symbolic meaning.
Let's start at the very beginning, the origin of the marriage.
Right. According to the text, specifically the Uttarakhanda of the Ramayana and the Ganesha Purana, this was not a standard arranged marriage between two human families. Ahalya is not a normal woman.
No. Brahma, the creator deity of the universe, physically creates her. She is crafted to be a being of unparalleled absolute beauty. Her very name, Ahalya, is often interpreted to imply perfection, someone devoid of any physical flaws or ugliness.
And Brahma doesn't just let her wander the earth. He specifically gifts her to Gautama as a bride.
It is framed within the texts as a supreme reward for Gautama's immense spiritual merit, his intense asceticism, and his unwavering dedication to truth. The universe essentially gifts the most perfect physical form to the most perfected logical mind.
And by all accounts in the early parts of the narrative, their union is a success. They have a divine, deeply spiritual marital life.
They live together in a tranquil ashram, far from the chaos of the cities, practicing austerities and meditations together. As we noted earlier, their son Shatananda is born from this harmonious union.
It is the picture of ancient domestic and spiritual bliss. But then we introduce the catalyst that shatters the peace. Indra, the king of the devas, the gods. Now, the Upasana Kanda and the Ramayana detail how Indra sees Ahalya and becomes entirely obsessively consumed by ego and lust.
He decides he must possess her, regardless of the consequences.
It is absolutely crucial to understand the archetype that Indra represents in ancient Indian literature.
Yes, Indra is the apex of cosmic, political, and elemental power. He commands the thunder, he brings the rain, he rules the heavens. But paradoxically, despite his immense power, he is frequently portrayed in these texts as deeply insecure, highly susceptible to vanity, and prone to letting his primal desires override his dharma, his righteous duty.
He represents the unchecked ego. He is the embodiment of the dangerous belief that possessing absolute power means you are somehow exempt from the absolute rules of morality.
He thinks he is above the law. So, driven by this arrogant lust, Indra executes a massive calculated deception. He stakes out the ashram. He waits for the exact moment when Gautama leaves the hermitage to perform his mandatory early morning river rituals.
And once the husband is gone,
Indra utilizes his divine shape-shifting powers to disguise himself. He alters his form to look, sound, and act exactly like Gautama. He walks right through the front door of the ashram, impersonating the husband, and engages in sexual intimacy with Ahalya.
it is an act of supreme violation. It is a violation of the physical sanctity of the marriage, a violation of the spiritual purity of the ashram, and a gross manipulation of a mortal's reality by a divine being.
But the perfect crime falls apart.
Gautama possesses a sort of heightened spiritual intuition, or perhaps he just finishes his rituals early. Regardless, he returns to the ashram unexpectedly. He walks in and he discovers the horrific deceit. He catches Indra, still in his disguise, attempting to flee the scene.
And this is the moment the paradox explodes.
The master of logic, the calm, detached philosopher we just spent half an hour analyzing, flies into an unimaginable, universe-shaking rage. The logic circuits overload, and he drops these heavy, reality-altering curses.
Let's examine the exact nature of these punishments as the sources describe them, because the specifics are deeply symbolic.
Okay, let's start with Indra.
For Indra, the king of the gods, the being who believed his power and physical beauty entitled him to take whatever he lusted after Gautama crafts a curse that attacks the very root of the sin. He curses Indra to have 1,000 vaginas physically manifest across his entire body.
It is a grotesque, shocking image.
It is intended to be. It is a highly symbolic punishment that instantly strips Indra of his vanity, his handsome form, and his godly dignity. It publicly, physically brands him with the exact nature of his uncontrolled lust. It forces him to wear his sin on his skin for the entire universe to see. The ego is utterly dismantled.
The logic of the punishment fits the crime perfectly. But then we turn to Ahalya. What does Gautama do to his wife?
He curses her to turn into stone. Depending on the specific text, this is sometimes described as her physically petrifying into a rock, or it is described as a mandatory, agonizingly long penance where she must exist in absolute silence,
Invisible and inaccessible to the world.
subsisting entirely on air. And this state will last until the distant, unforeseeable future, when the foot of Lord Rama graces her and breaks the curse.
Wait, hold on. This is where I struggle, and it is the most difficult part of the narrative for a modern reader to digest. What does this mean for Ahalya?
It's a very challenging part of the text.
To our modern sensibilities, this feels like the ultimate horrific example of victim blaming. Indra is the one who stalked the ashram. Indra is the one who used divine magic to trick her. He literally disguised himself as her husband.
Right.
If she genuinely believed she was being intimate with Gautama, why is she hit with this absolutely devastating, life-ending curse? Why turn her to stone? How is that justice?
You are hitting on the most heavily debated, analyzed, and reinterpreted aspect of this entire mythological cycle. To approach this, we require a very nuanced view, recognizing that the story has evolved over millennia.
Okay, laid out for me.
First, it is important to note that different regional texts and later poets treat Ahalya's level of complicity differently.
How so?
Some older, more rigid interpretations imply that she possessed enough spiritual insight to see through Indra's disguise, but was secretly flattered by the desperate attention of the king of the gods, and therefore allowed the encounter to happen.
Oh, wow.
However, many other traditions and prominent later retellings emphatically state that she was purely innocent, entirely deceived by a magic she could not comprehend, and was a tragic victim of divine abuse of power.
But here's the sticking point. Regardless of which version of her intent you read, she still gets hit with the curse. Gautama still turns her to stone.
Yes, and this is where we have to dive deep into the philosophy of karma and the psychological symbolism of the text.
Mm.
In this ancient framework, the story is used to explore the immense, inescapable weight of our physical actions and the environments we allow ourselves to be vulnerable within.
So even an action born of deception leaves a karmic residue.
Exactly. But let's look beyond the literal magic and examine the profound psychological symbolism of turning to stone. When a human being undergoes a severe, foundation-shattering trauma like discovering a massive betrayal, experiencing an intimate violation, and watching their entire reality violently collapse, what happens to their psychology?
They freeze. They completely shut down. They become numb to the world.
Exactly. The petrification, the turning to stone, can be powerfully viewed not just as a magical, vindictive punishment from an angry husband, but as an ancient, brilliant metaphor for a severe trauma response.
That is heavy.
She enters a state of profound emotional numbness. She is forced into silent, isolated introspection following a catastrophic event. The stone represents her being completely removed from the world of sensory experience, desire, and interaction. She is frozen in trauma.
Wow, I have never heard it framed that way before. That is incredibly powerful. It is an ancient psychological description of dissociation. The mind and body turn to stone to survive the unbearable pain of the betrayal and the collapse of her life.
Yes. Furthermore, within the strict framework of Nyaya and karma, the curse is undeniably severe, but in these philosophical texts, it is never framed merely as an act of petty destruction. It is not an execution, it is a quarantine. The curse is a force mechanism for purification.
Explain that. How does turning to stone purify anything?
Because it forces a total pause on all worldly karma. While she is stone, she cannot commit any new actions, good or bad. She is removed from the cycle of desire and consequence.
So it's a timeout for the soul.
It is a severe, agonizing penance that acts as a spiritual crucible. The intense heat of this isolation eventually burns away the impurity of the traumatic event, paving the way for eventual moksha, or ultimate liberation.
It really challenges the reader to think deeply about the nature of justice. Is a punishment simply meant to inflict retributive pain, or is it intended to be a rigorous, painful surgery meant to remove a spiritual cancer and ultimately reform the soul?
Exactly. So the curse is almost like a spiritual chrysalis. It is a dark, hard, restrictive place she is forced to go into in order to survive the trauma, process the event in absolute isolation, and eventually emerge completely purified.
That is a heavy, heavy concept. But it makes the actions of Gautama much more complex than just a man throwing a tantrum.
It elevates the entire narrative.
Yeah.
It pits Indra's divine entitlement, the belief that power can escape responsibility, directly against Gautama's uncompromising, terrifying force of karmic justice, with Ahalya caught in the tragic crossfire, enduring the necessary purification.
But the underlying beauty of these ancient epics is that a curse is rarely the end of the story. It isn't a final period. It is almost always a comma. In this mythology, a curse is usually the painful catalyst for divine intervention and ultimate grace.
Yes, which brings us to the next vital movement of Gautama's life: redemption, reversal, and divine grace.
Let's look at how the universe repairs this massive fracture.
Let's start with the instigator, Indra. He does not stay cursed with 1,000 vaginas for eternity. He is deeply humiliated. He suffers immensely. He is driven out of his position of power, but he is eventually returned to normal.
And the mechanism of his cure is fascinating. The sources state that Gautama himself, the man who cursed him, eventually recites a specific, powerful mantra to lift the worst of the physical affliction from Indra's body.
Right.
Wait, Gautama cures the guy who violated his wife? Why would he do that?
Because true justice, in the Nyaya framework, is not infinite blind vengeance. It is about restoring equilibrium. Once the karmic debt is paid, once the suffering matches the crime, the balance is restored.
Continuing to punish beyond that point becomes a new karmic violation.
And through this horrifying ordeal, Indra is fundamentally humbled. The texts, specifically the Ganesha Purana, note that through the agony of this process, Indra discovers the true spiritual greatness of Lord Ganesha.
He realizes there are powers far greater than his own ego.
He takes this newfound spiritual realization back to the devas in the heavens. The trauma of the curse actually facilitates a necessary spiritual evolution for the king of the gods.
The punishment served its purpose, okay, but what about Ahalya? Her redemption is arguably one of the most iconic, widely celebrated moments in the entire Ramayana epic.
It is the ultimate manifestation of divine grace. Thousands of years pass, epochs change. Ahalya exists in this state of petrified silence, frozen in trauma and penance. Then the Rama-avatar occurs, the incarnation of the supreme preserver deity Lord Vishnu in the human form of Rama.
Rama, while still a relatively young prince, is traveling through the forest to the kingdom of Janakpur alongside his fierce guru, the sage Vishwamitra.
And their geographical path takes them directly through the overgrown, deserted, utterly silent ruins of Gautama's old ashram.
As they enter the space, Vishwamitra turns to Rama and tells him the tragic, ancient history of the ashram, the deception of Indra, and the curse of Ahalya.
And as Rama walks through the grounds, his foot gently graces the stone that is Ahalya. The mere physical touch of the divine, the ultimate embodiment of pure dharma and compassion, instantly shatters the ancient curse.
It is such an evocative, beautiful visual, the touch of pure compassion breaking the hard, cold stone of trauma and rigid justice.
She is instantly liberated. She emerges from the stone form, completely purified, radiant, her dignity fully restored, and her long karmic penance definitively ended. She is recognized by the divine as pure.
But we cannot forget about Gautama and all this. What happens to the architect of logic after he drops the curses? His home is destroyed and his family is shattered. He doesn't just dust off his hands and go back to teaching epistemology under a tree.
No. Gautama recognizes the immense gravity of the situation. A massive disruption of the cosmic order occurred in his home, under his watch. The heavy karmic energy of the curse he unleashed requires balancing, so Gautama himself undergoes severe, almost unimaginable penance.
Where does he go?
He abandons the ruined ashram and travels far south to the Brahmagiri mountain region. There he engages in intense, punishing asceticism.
He goes into his own form of isolation and suffering. He doesn't exempt himself from the cycle of penance.
Precisely. He turns his formidable will inward. And his penance is so profound, so pure in its intent, that it ripples through the cosmos and pleases Lord Mahadev Shiva, the supreme ascetic.
And as a direct result of Gautama's spiritual fire, Shiva physically manifests in that exact location as the Trimbakeshwar Jyotirlinga.
Exactly.
Let me contextualize that for the listener. A Jyotirlinga is considered a supreme, radiant, infinite manifestation of Shiva. There are only 12 of them in all of India. They are massive, intensely revered spiritual power centers. Gautama literally called one into existence.
And this specific divine manifestation does not just create a local shrine. It triggers a geographical miracle that alters the subcontinent. Shiva's manifestation brings the holy, purifying waters of the Ganges River down from the north into South India.
This new rushing river becomes known as the Gautami Ganga, or as it is known to millions today, the Godavari River.
Yes.
I am just completely floored by the scale and the butterfly effect of this narrative. Think about the chain of events here. One domestic tragedy, a moment of supreme betrayal, lust, and explosive pain in a small, isolated ashram triggers a karmic chain reaction that literally results in the creation of one of India's most important life-giving rivers and the establishment of a major Jyotirlinga.
It is as if the universe took a moment of absolute localized devastation and alchemized it into lasting, tangible, physical and spiritual nourishment for millions of people across millennia.
If we pull back and connect all the dots, Gautama's entire life is a masterclass in the inescapable cycle of karma. A severe violation of dharma by Indra leads to the application of harsh, unyielding justice in the form of the curses.
That justice requires a profound period of painful penance and suffering for everyone involved. Indra, Ahalya, and Gautama himself.
But that suffering is not arbitrary. It is not meaningless. It ultimately results in massive cosmic grace. It results in the redemption and purification of Ahalya by the supreme divine compassion of Rama.
And it results in the bringing of a life-giving river to humanity through Gautama's own grueling spiritual labor. It is a complete, perfect cycle of fall, consequence, purification, and glorious redemption.
Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle we set out to solve today, the lasting imprint. How does a mythic figure from the Rigvedic era, a man who dealt in abstract rules of logic and through cosmic curses, physically impact the modern 21st century world?
This is where the insights from the Gautama Maharishi come into play.
Yes. It is vital to understand that these stories are not just dead text relegated to the dusty shelves of university libraries. They are lived reality for millions of people. The physical geography of India is literally mapped with these narratives. They are woven into the earth.
Specifically, the sources point us to the Mithila region, located near Darbhanga in the modern state of Bihar. In the village of Brahmapur, there is a physical location called Ahidiyastan.
And today, right now, as we are having this conversation, people are making active pilgrimages to this exact site. They visit the temple dedicated to this narrative, and they physically bathe in the Gautam Kund and the Ahilya Kund, the sacred pools of water named directly after the sage and his wife.
They travel there to seek spiritual purification, to wash away their own karmic burdens.
It is so incredibly fascinating to me. You can sit in a brightly lit modern classroom and read a dense, incredibly complex philosophical text like the Nyaya Sutras. You can debate the abstract rules of logic, perception, and epistemology that Gautama codified.
And then you can hop on a train, travel to rural Bihar, and take a physical dip in a pool of water named after the very guy who wrote that logic textbook, seeking spiritual grace.
The physical locations anchor these massive abstract concepts, justice, penance, purity, logic, into the tangible daily experiential lives of normal people.
It perfectly bridges the gap between the purely intellectual and the deeply experiential. It serves as a powerful reminder that philosophy, in the ancient Indian context, was never meant to be just an intellectual exercise or a logic puzzle to be solved for fun.
It is intended to be a comprehensive way of life, a grueling path to purification, and a practical map for navigating the incredible, often painful complexities of human existence.
Oh, sure.
Okay, let's bring all of this together. We set out at the beginning of this deep dive to unpack the life of Gautama Maharishi, and I genuinely feel like we have traversed an entire universe of thought. If we synthesize all the key takeaways from our sources, what we see is this incredible, almost paradoxical duality coexisting perfectly in one man.
On one hand, he is the cold, rational, structural father of Nyaya. He's the brilliant logician who saw entirely through the thick fog of societal prejudice to evaluate a marginalized, outcast boy named Satyakama purely on the objective merit of his truthfulness.
And on the exact same hand, he is the fierce, passionate, deeply feeling sage whose personal life became the epicenter of an epic mythological tragedy.
His uncompromising structural sense of justice triggered devastating curses, which in turn paved the way for divine redemptions by the avatar of Vishnu and the miraculous geographical birth of the Godavari River. He is the mind that structured human thought and the will that reshaped the earth.
So as you process all of this information, consider how we so often view logic and emotion, or strict justice and compassionate grace, as complete opposites. We tend to think you are either a creature of cold reason or you are a creature of passionate faith.
But Gautama's massive, sprawling life suggests something much more profound. It suggests that true, holistic justice actually requires both.
It absolutely requires the sharp, unyielding logic to see the truth of a situation clearly without bias or illusion. But it also requires the deep, resilient emotional capacity to undergo severe penance, to endure the trauma of betrayal, and to ultimately seek and accept grace when everything you thought you knew falls apart.
It is the realization that the cold rules of debate and epistemology can help you clearly understand the world. But it is the fires of penance, the endurance of suffering, and the ultimate grace of redemption that actually transform it.
Exactly. And that leaves me with a final thought to mull over. We started this journey by talking about how murky the landscape of truth and justice can be in our lives. Gautama gave the world the foundational rules of logical debate. He built the ultimate diagnostic machine for the human mind. He taught us how to prove what is real.
But his own life's greatest, most lasting lessons, Ahalya's miraculous redemption from the hard stone of trauma, and the life-giving flow of the Godavari River born from his own suffering, those didn't come from a perfectly structured logical syllogism.
They came from moments of profound, unexplainable divine grace and human endurance. It makes you wonder if the absolute father of logic ultimately found his greatest legacy in acts of faith, trauma, and divine redemption. Where exactly is the line between the things we can reason out and the things we just have to believe?